Hello and welcome to the news. The news this evening where we're talking about discussing the news, and one of the things discussing is the Italian president refusing to allow the Prime Minister his resignation amid a coalition crisis. So it's said that this political crisis could trigger a snap election. A lot of politicians are resigning around the world. We've got Sri Lanka, we've got Italy, we have, England due to resign in September fully. All of the things that's happening here, a lot of shift in politics, and mostly it's going to the right, interestingly, and mostly going to bad things, when I say bad things, I do mean bad/pointless things. So, doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. If you're poor, it's bad things for you. If you're rich, it's like kind of good things for you, I guess, but and there are other things which are kind of like worse for you. Not really, they're just like nothing, and that's the thing you have there, where they're bad for people, but they're not necessarily good for anyone else. If you know what I mean, there are certain policies that are being implemented that are, they don't help anyone, except maybe people who are, like racist or something, like that kind of thing. Yeah, it's just kind of weird. Anyway, getting to the next thing. Spain has moved ahead with a bill to honor victims of the Franco dictatorship. Because, hundreds of thousands of people were killed during the Spanish Civil War. Of course, maybe not officially killed. They, just happened to, disappear. One day they were there, one day they weren't. Yeah, they were murdered, yeah. Fairly obviously. That kind of thing where you do have the situation where you do have to take that into account there. And in other talks, we do have a situation when it comes to the situation where we have a lot of wildfires, for example, are spreading in European countries, hit by a second heat wave in a matter of weeks. So yeah, this is generally, Europe is mostly a landscape that doesn't tend to get as many wildfires. You've got countries like America and Australia that are used to wildfires, but, Europe tends not to get them, not necessarily never, but, we are seeing increasing ones because, of course, climate change. At the same time as the US begins to try and pull away from their climate action, where the Supreme Court is removing the power of the EPA, and also England, also apparently England looks like they're going to be moving slightly away, oh yes, we no longer need, we need to start cutting the tax on fuel to help the workers out. We definitely couldn't just tax the wealthy more. I mean, they're the ones making the money now, while everyone else is losing money. So, I mean, to maybe taxing them might be beneficial, even just a little bit more, not necessarily so much that they'd actually begin to lose money, just a little bit more, let's say 5% extra, that kind of thing. Just a little bit more, that kind of thing. Anyway, basically, to get to my point, in this scenario, you are seeing a lot of countries that are removing things that incentivize progress. And they're basically just like, yeah, we'll progress, even though, in England, you've got politicians going up with the Tory leadership party. They're like, oh no, we should remove the fuel tax. Okay, that's gonna make it less likely that you'll go towards green energy, because the whole point is the tax is not gone. It's designed for people to go to renewable, so you don't pay the tax if you don't go to renewable. So if you just build renewable plants, then people they won't have to pay the tax. Do you understand? Very simple. But basically, yeah, not all things looking good for the environment. And I think at this point we have to sort of admit, if things continue the way they are, we are not going to succeed. America is a massive carbon emitter. If they can't do anything with their companies, with their people, and if England also wants to push back on that sort of thing, then we're going to have to face facts. The world is fact. So yeah, that's not very positive, but that is the fact. There are also Garda chiefs issuing strict rules for Garda and cancelling district court cases. Because, it is dodgy when police start cancelling district court cases. It's, corruption is right there. And talking about corruption, the US Secret Service have deleted text messages from the Capitol riot. So yeah, not exactly the best situation there. Proof that Donald Trump, definitely, was intentionally staging a coup against the government. That's dodgy. You do see the type of thing where, oftentimes the Secret Service is there to protect the president, so you could argue, is this just to protect the president? Like, oh, this thing can actually get a president arrested for treason because they literally tried to have a riot and a coup against the government, to upstage the government and hang the vice president at that time. Just like, but that does seem a bit suspicious there, to see. And the Sri Lankan president has resigned after fleeing the country. So yeah, the parliament is due to convene on Saturday to start the process of electing a new president. I think they might want to consider just, how serious it is, because, you do want to be careful not to just land in a situation where you're just like, we're just going to have the same thing. Because there's a reason why people try to force them out, because they were like, we have a problem here. You didn't do anything to stop the problem. Come on, out you go. You're elected by the people to do a job. You didn't do it, so ouch. And the U.S. House has passed bills to protect abortion access, but Senate approval is unlikely. The legislation is passed by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, but it is unlikely to advance in the Senate because, Republicans famous for their rights, except if you're a woman. Then your rights are feck all to them. Or if you're homosexual, then your rights are feck all to them. Or if you're transgender, then your rights are feck all. Yeah, it seems to me like when people are talking about rights, the US is not a great place for your rights. You basically need to be a cis male, and also white, and straight. Although technically, you are in the position where you could, say that looking at that, you're like, many times people in authority, if you want to reach authority, you have to hide your sexuality. That was supposed to be back in the day. But it looks like now, not even now. It looks like just that wasn't back in the day. It's just so much so that the Republican Party in America are now, like, they've got the Senate, so now it's like, I know. Rights are just not a thing on the forefront of America, really. They're not really there when it comes to it. Yeah, not the best country, really. And when it comes to rapists, a rapist who entered a woman's home with a crowbar has been jailed for 10 years. This active victim continues to suffer from effects such as flashbacks, nightmares, PTSD, and panic attacks. Maybe give them more than 10 years for that, maybe give them life, who knows. But, and in other news, when it comes to people who have committed crimes, the Saudi Crown Prince has greeted Joe Biden with a fist bump ahead of a key meeting. Biden became the first U.S. leader to fly directly to Israel to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And when it comes to homelessness, concerns are raised for a homeless population amid warnings of exceptionally high temperatures. So lots of things going on there where you're seeing, things there. So in the situation when you have the, leaders meeting with fist bumps and everything. In fairness, that's the facade. You will find that in politics, where there's that. So, it's often I was there. And there are search and survivals underway after a missile strike in central Ukraine killed at least 23 people. The Russians claimed that strikes targeted a meeting of the Ukrainian military officials and foreign army suppliers. Although, probably not. And a British aid volunteer has also died. Most likely murdered, but the Russian-backed rebels have claimed that he died of a chronic illness and stress. Sure, definitely. And Robert has been handed a 30-year jail term for a terrifying raid on the home of Ashley Cole. So yeah, basically, the robber was part of a gang who tied up the former football player in front of his children and threatened to cut off his fingers. Yeah, it's pretty violent. So yeah, he's been ordered to serve an extended license period of 5 years by a judge who said that the defender and his partner had suffered psychological impacts that cannot be overstated. Of course, you would say there have been instances where this kind of thing has happened before, just not to celebrities. So sometimes you could look at it and go, well, it maybe deserves the 30-year sentence, but is the reason behind the 30-year sentence because the person was a celebrity? It's kind of an interesting thing there. Of course, he was convicted along 5 others for the roles in a string, of course, of things, which is robberies and burglaries between October 2018 and January 2020. So you do have the whole thing where it's like, well, you did this and 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 this, and you have to take that effect. So maybe not just because he was, just because he attacked a celebrity, although, maybe because, you still, once again, you would point out there are certain things, there. Also, concerning people who have invested heavily in security, clearly it's not safe because this is a celebrity who invested heavily in security, and he feels like it's a fortress now. But I wouldn't be so sure. That's him there. He now feels that's the case. So, yeah, you want to protect yourself, then heavily invest in security, I guess. Is that the picture we get? Well, I don't exactly have the money to buy all that security equipment, but if he has the money to put up security cameras and all these sort of things and has a guard dog to bring along with him, who knows? But still, I do feel sorry for him. It can be a very traumatic experience. So I'm not downplaying his situation. Just questioning, maybe the sentence is due to the fact that he was a celebrity, and that's why man is sentenced for 30 years. But maybe that's not the case. I don't know. I'm not claiming anything. Anyway, so. A man has been jailed for an attack on a homeless shelter resident, which was filmed on Snapchat. So, yeah. So, he was sentenced to 3.5 years for assaulting a homeless man, unfortunately. A terrible thing to do, but, he'll have 3.5 years to think about it. So, yeah. And when it comes to Palestine, Biden has likened Palestinians to the Irish Catholics on a trip to the Middle East. Now, what does he mean by that? It's interesting. He was speaking at an East Jerusalem hospital. Not sure if he's defending them or not, but I think he does have a family of a background of an Irish American, and yeah, I think the one difference with the Catholics and the the British Empire, Israel and Palestine, is that in fairness to the British Empire, at least they didn't start saying, oh, yeah, we're calling this England now. Although, is that better? Who knows? Is that exactly better? I don't think that can even work, though, because if it's an island. They did take part of Wales and pop it into England. That's why you will have a section of England that is technically, historically Welsh, but it's actually not considered Welsh, but So yeah, it is You can, of course, compare them, though, where you do have this sort of imperialistic style thing. You know, the US has had a history of supporting the Israeli government. Interestingly, as someone who's actually studied history myself, I have looked into this, and you do see that technically Israel actually did claim to Irish Americans as if they were being persecuted literally by the British, which is interesting. So basically, when you have this history of the, you have your Israel kind of beginnings, and you have the people there who are saying, well, look at the people Britain has brought in. They're the same people that were brought in to suppress the Irish. Look at them, look at their horrible actions, look at that. And then they use that to garner support from the Americans. Although technically, they weren't necessarily singled out, and there has been questions raised as to whether or not, they were necessarily telling the truth and nothing but the truth, there. So yeah, a lot of things going on there. And the European Commission has taken Hungary to court over anti-LGBTQ laws. So the Hungary laws describe the laws as anti-pedophilia, which bans the promotion of homosexuality and gender reassignment to under 18s. Of course, I've said this before. If you do want to be transphobic, that's how you do it. If you honestly do think that talking to kids about gender is bad, then ban them talking about all gender, okay? Because here's the thing. It's bad if a child is transgender and you start forcing that child into, their body. Like, no, we're not talking about that. And when the child asks a question, the teacher can actually answer, and the teacher is forced not to. That's a problem, okay? Especially when you just say things like under 18s. Like, under 18s. What? But, like, especially when it comes to gender reassignment. Like, kids are able to tell about their own gender, okay? Let's just face facts. Kids are often able to tell about their own gender. Not always, but often. And it tends to be the case that they're not wrong, they just haven't considered it, For example, a child might be 4, and, the reason why they haven't come out as trans and said and expressed that feeling. Maybe they don't want to tell you because you're a transphobic parent, but let's get beyond. So, but maybe they don't fully come to terms with that until they're later on in life. But that is oftentimes society. But also the fact that it can be a thing where children are not necessarily fully understanding of it, but the point is they are able to say at that age if they are transgender, and they say that they are. I have not seen any children before that have said they're transgender at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and aren't. Also, just very, very, very dodgy laws there. Once again, as I said before, if you want to have these kind of laws, you have to make them general. You have to say no talk about gender at all, because otherwise you're picking a specific group of people, and then you're just being transphobic. If you say, oh, you can't talk about relationships, okay, we don't talk about relationships. Bit hard to make sure that that's not really hard. That's a very hard thing to enforce. But you have to ban everything, because if you don't, then you are singling out a group of people. So then you are being homophobic or transphobic or racist. You can't just introduce policy and go, oh look, it's anti-pedophilia. But it's like, okay, but you do know most pedophiles are straight and cis, so what does that tell you? So yeah, the Commission considers the law violates the internal market rules, the fundamental rights of individuals, which, it kind of does, as well as EU values. Now, the European Court of Justice can impose fines and financial penalties on non-compliance with its decisions. I think that's fair to Hungary. They should be, not allowed to do that. No offense meant, but yeah, it's like when you have racist laws in America. If you've got a racist law in America, yeah, boycott them. Yeah, you're being racist. That's just a fact. You shouldn't do that. That is just cruel. The Hungarian nationalist and conservative, what can you expect, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has assured the law is not homophobic and aims to protect the right of children, which doesn't really seem like it does. What about all the homosexual children? Yeah. So, Maria Walsh, a Fine Gael MEP, has a vocal and is a vocal advocate for the LGBTQ rights, has welcomed the decision to sue Hungary and has called it an absolute violation of basic human rights and an unlawful attack on democratic standards, which it kind of is. Singling groups of people out in your country and, discriminating against them is just a really, really moronic thing to do, and it doesn't really benefit anyone, really, except if you're not part of those groups, I guess. As I've said before, one of the benefits of racism, transphobia, homophobia, sexism, classism, all of this, the only benefit is to the people who aren't part of those groups, because they will find it much easier to rise in the world. Because if you have to compete with every single person in the labor force for a high-paying job or a high-power job, for example, in politics, you're going to find it problematic in comparison to a situation where you're a white, straight, cis man. Then, of course, you might have a more easier time if you also come from a wealthier background. You might have a bit of easier if there's a lot of discrimination. So that's why these kind of policies, you should always be very careful of them, because they seem to either make no sense and they're just someone being really, 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 really racist, or homophobic or transphobic or and such. Or they're designed for people who aren't in any of those groups to discriminate and that way progress without, competition. So yeah, there's also, of course, in Hungary, doesn't exactly have the best history when it comes to media freedom and free speech. So yeah, Hungary, it's not the best country, really. Hate crime is also very common in Hungary. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other countries. It does. It happens in America, happens in England, happens in all these countries around the world. Very few countries are free from hate crime, but it's just Hungary has a strong history with it. Very similar to the countries like England and America and, a lot of these hard right countries many years ago. Nowadays, a lot of people who would have committed hate crimes are a little bit more, stuck to, shouting abuse and try and get people to kill themselves online, which is also terrible. And I think, you should punish them for it, which is one of the reasons why I think Japan's cyberbullying thing can be effective. If you do, force someone into suicide online, you should, face the consequences for that. Be careful what you say. Like, if you said to someone on the street, that would be counted as abuse, and you would go to prison for that. So, yeah. Hungary has again signalled out of the Commission's latest report of the new rule of law in which the EU presented on Wednesday. Now, Brussels has also triggered a procedure that could allow the suspension of EU funds to the country due to shortfalls by budget on fighting corruption. One of the benefits of this could be, other countries might get, nicer little subsidies and all these sort of things. We could, get all these things here. And I think, Hungary should face consequences for this. It is important to face consequences for this. It's not very nice. And the Taoiseach of Ireland has gone to a visit to Japan and expressing condolences for the killing of the former leader. Yeah. Well, Yeah, it's a lot of going and going there. And in other news, when it comes to the Van Gogh painting or portrait, that it is suggested that it could be worth 118 million. So yeah, it depends, of course, who can technically claim ownership of this. Generally, people who have bought it, but of course, whenever this happens, it does bring into an issue of like, well, I sold it to you when I didn't know it was secretly a Van Gogh. Maybe you did. So, you do have the issue. Like, if I know something is a really valuable painting, and one way to sometimes, create a market history is to have you have it, and then you sell it to me for the cheaper price. And then I go, oh, look, it's a Van Gogh. See, now I have many, 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 many times the price. So, it is, you do want to be careful, basically, is what I'm saying, But yeah, 118 million. I wonder who'll buy that. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of things going on, and yeah, a lot of things going on in politics. You do have your leadership debate there. As I said, a lot of a lot of problems in the leadership debate in England. A lot of transphobia, interestingly. So transphobia, tax cuts, and tax cuts that are also for the rich. So like, not the best there. And also, tax cuts, but we'll be funding the services, the public services. How? You'll be giving interest to public services, but you'll also be cutting tax. Right. Of course, they could use the policy, which is generally more left-wing, which is to basically raise taxes on the wealthy and raise taxes on the businesses, and also set price caps, so you can't increase the prices on certain goods too far, so that inflation stops a bit. You also can increase your rental blocks, and you can also build more housing so that people don't have to rent. And what this will all do is reduce inflation. But of course, the problem is inflation at this current point. It is a very profitable thing if you're a particular industry, because oftentimes inflation is not chasing wages. It is not chasing anything really. It is chasing profit. If you want to increase profits, you say, okay, well we're going to put it up by 20%. Price of good, or we're going to reduce the size of the product by 20%. But of course, you get the profits. Then, well, what do you think happens when the worker does not have enough food to eat? Well, they have to buy more food, and that increases the price even further because you go, oh, increase demand. It's like, yeah, you've got people need to buy more product, or if it's a price increase, oh, look, increase in profits. Yeah, because yeah, that's what happens. So oftentimes you do have this issue of, what do you do in this scenario? Well, you implement things like price capping. You stop companies from just blatantly shoving up their prices so they can have massive profits and then blame it on inflation. And that is one of the things you do see here, where many companies are blaming things on inflation. And some companies have the psychology of, oh, it's preparation. We need to make sure that we're prepared for the next inflation round. We're thinking, well, you see, if we don't increase the prices at all, you see, then what will happen is we won't need to increase the prices. And because inflation won't happen, because, you see, when the cost doesn't rise for the raw materials, you're just increasing the price because it costs more to buy goods and services. But it only costs more to buy goods and services because you think it'll cost more to buy goods and services. But those people who are setting the prices want to increase the price because of profits. And this kind of thing that chases. It's the same thing when consumers go, oh, there might be a shortage. So they buy out all the goods. You're like, there wasn't going to be a shortage. You caused it. This issue of like, no, you can't blame inflation when you're the cause of the inflation. Anyway, of course, you could argue the whole energy crisis, that could be, solved by, having green energy. But, let's not talk about things that could have been or should have been, really, because, that's when people were being advised. But, a lot of things going on there. So not the best situations here and now. Well, that's the world. It's all fact, and we're all going to die horrible deaths. unless you're really, really rich and you can get off this planet, in which case you're still going to die a horrible death because, well, you're not getting into a nice planet anyway. Anyway, that's the end of today. Well, not the end of today, but the end of this stream. Goodbye. Forever. Well, not forever.